Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kathi Fountain from Oxford University Press, and we've got a group of panelists here to talk about the OA ecosystem and how each of our principles that are in this environment are dealing with the transition to OA in their budgeting and in their planning. And we've got three panelists here who are going to give their perspectives on what they are doing within their own institutions and organizations and trying to move the conversation forward for open access. What we're going to do is a couple of questions, and each of our panelists are going to answer those questions in quick succession. We'll have just a couple of slides too, and then we'll open it up for some audience questions as well. And hopefully we've got a nice blend of time, both for those up here and those in the audience who would like to ask questions and get answers. So with that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and get started and ask my panelists to both introduce themselves and address a particular question. So as you get started, introduce yourself and then your comments. So my first question for our panelists is, what impact has the move to OA had on your budgeting process? George.
Thank you. My name is George Machovec. I'm Executive Director at the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries. We're based in Denver. We have 16-member libraries. We range from some large ARL libraries down to some very small colleges and universities. So we have quite a diversity. We're not a homogeneous group at all. One of the things that the impact has had on us is renewals are a lot more complicated, way more complicated. Even if we don't end up doing a transformative deal, we have to go through the process of discussing it with the group and figuring out what we're going to do collectively, whether we walk away or do something. We've also found that with these different size institutions, some are high publishers, some are not. Some publish almost nothing in some of the deals that we're working on. So what we have to do is figure out economically, how will that work? Because when you think about group deals, one of the things is that if you're going to pay for APCs or if your prices are going to go up because of these costs in a consortium, should those costs, rising costs, be distributed equally among members in the consortium? So a small liberal arts school that publishes almost nothing in a STEM journal, but they're in the package, should they be paying more when a deal gets worked out, or should some accommodation be made for them? And sometimes that accommodation happens in the consortium itself. We may not, we'll have the offer from the publisher, but we internally might look at, do we want to redistribute costs or not apply some of those rising costs equally to all members? One of the other big challenges that happens in a consortium is that when you do a deal, how do you distribute, for example, APCs between a group of libraries? So for example, if you get a pool, let's say you do a deal and you get 500 APCs, or 500, if you will, free or lower costs for publishing each article. How do you distribute that? Once again, you might have a medical school, for example, we do, and they could suck them all up. So that pretty soon, and then the smaller schools who maybe have just limited publishing aren't able to take advantage of those. So then that brings the question to the table of how do authors, especially in a consortial deal, know that you've got these either discounted or free publishing APC charges for your group? And so from my point of view, the publishers themselves need to be working on things in the author submission process to let people know about all of the options that are available to them. And also, if the publisher could also then work on trying to have tools to help distribute those by the consortia to members based on some sort of local criteria that need to be handled. So life is more complicated for us. That's been also true because of declining budgets. So you've got this interest in transformative agreements that raises costs, and many of our schools are seeing declines in enrollment. And when that happens, they get reduced budgets, so you've got this bad situation where prices might be going up and the available funds are down.
Thank you. Okay, Alison.
Thank you. There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Alison Denby. I'm the VP for Journals at Oxford University Press. Despite the accent, I'm based in America, and I speak, forgive me for speaking at American speed sometimes. So we publish around 500 journals, about 130 pure OA journals, 75% of them for other non-for-profits. So for societies, 293 different societies we represent. So we're very much about making sure we sustain value in high-quality, impactful publishing as we transition towards open access. I'm a visual person, so you're going to have to bear with a slide in a panel, but sometimes I think we remember things a little bit better when we see a picture too. So I was looking at some of the binaries of when we've gone from a subscription model to an open access model, and they are binaries, right? There's no binaries here in this pure sense, but to give you a concept of what we're looking at and how things are changing. So the first one I want to look at is that consumer pays versus the producer pays. So the move from the consumer, the reader paying to read, to the producer, be that an institution or a funder or an individual author now paying. And what we did was we mapped all of our different customers, and this goes exactly to George's point. So those read-intensive customers should pay less, and the research-intensive customers pay more. And that's one of the things that we're trying to balance constantly with all our different library partners and groups of libraries. How do we manage those changes in who pays what? And it's not just within a consortium, as George mentioned. You've got smaller consortium members, large ones. It's regionally. So you see high research output from certain regions and lower research output from other regions. So we're balancing all of this in trying to manage effectively in terms of your budgets, manage in terms of effective surplus back to our societies to support their continued work, while making this long-term sustainable for each of our customer groups. So lots and lots of really tricky conversations that we are having with everybody all the time, but trying to make that work for everybody. The other consequences that we're seeing is a change in the type of content that we're able to publish, because we're having to focus on now content that is effectively chargeable. So when we're in a pay to publish, we can't ask people to pay for invited content, for example, things like book reviews, and a chart is there from Dimensions. And I'll do a sales pitch actually for for Dimensions here, unintentionally. Maybe we'll get a discount. But we've seen a real decline in things like book reviews, and that's not good necessarily. How do we, as a community, help to support the diversity in content that we're proud of and makes a difference? Similarly, humanities, social science content. How do we make sure that that survives as we transition into very different models and different payment models? So, some of the unintended consequences, and you can see on the other side of the chart, the subscription-based content is fairly flat, whereas we've seen this massive volume increase because now the motivation to publish more drives financial returns for many of our industry. What do we do, and I'll hopefully come to this a little bit later, what can we do together to figure out how to manage that so we're not publishing a whole lot more that doesn't matter, but we're still continuing to focus on high-quality content, and back to some of Judy's points in the opening, that's impactful, that is has integrity and trust. So a lot of challenging questions going on here, and hopefully we can talk about some maybe solutions and ideas as we go through the panel.
Thank you, Alison. Joel?
Joel Thornton, Associate Dean for Collection and Scholarly Communication at the University of Utah. There are a few things that we've had to deal with. One is reframing the problem from a library problem to a university problem. And that's a significant issue. And that required us having conversations with our research office to align our values and interests. And one of the things we recognize is that if we tried to go it alone, it would just be cost prohibitive to be able to move to transition to OA agreements. Second thing we did was we initiated overall program coordination, and we unified our funding streams. And one of the things we had to do is that we had to shift our view from a silo view of cost and disparate funding to a unified view. And that enabled us to create a better and a more economical funding infrastructure. The third thing we had to do is that we had to change our evaluation methods, because there are several flavors of OA and just various models out there. we had to create what I call an investment filter. And that filter was designed to help us focus our efforts so that we focus on prioritizing the top 10 publishers. And we did that because we wanted to have the greatest impact, okay? And one of our core philosophies was OA, but at a reasonable cost, okay? And that's different from institution to institution. The fourth thing we had to do is that we changed our metrics, and because there are a lot more variables that now we have to consider. And one of the key metrics for us was kind of looking at the incremental costs associated with transitioning to open access. And that requires us being able to dissect the proposals and determining how the various pieces, whether it be content, publishing, you name it, should be valued. And that in itself can be a challenging task. And then the last thing is that we had to look at how we manage risk because now research output volume takes on greater importance. The higher expected volume, it drives additional costs. And so we need different mitigation strategies to be able to address those types of things.
Thank you. That was all very interesting. And I would like to ask now, how does OA fit into your strategic priorities? So you've obviously had to deal with it budgetarily, but how do you do it strategically? And what steps are you doing to take to support those priorities? And let me start with Joel.
Okay. And funding OA at a reasonable cost, that is a university priority, and that priority is supported by researcher demand as well as their behavior. And as I mentioned previously, the steps that we're taking entail, number one is reframing the problem from a library problem to a university problem. Two is utilizing overall program coordination. Three is unifying our funding streams, and four is prioritizing comprehensive agreements with our top 10 publishers.
Thank you. George.
We view transformative deals as just a new business model. Unfortunately, they're all different. Every single one we've approached, some it's a discount, sometimes, costs are rising. And so we're really in a tough spot. We do want to avoid double dipping by publishers whenever possible, so that brings to light the issue of, for example, some larger publishers have hybrid journals where they're behind a paywall, but you can pay your APC. Others are gold from the beginning. And sometimes in contracts, the publishers try to keep these separate. So we've had instances where, we'll get a deal offered to us, and we say, well, what about the gold side? And they go, oh, well, that's not included. And then they have a whole different set of not only APC costs, but we also have to deal with then, can we fold that into a common contract? Because the authors do not know. They don't know that something is a hybrid journal or a gold journal. They just know they want to publish it somewhere that has high impact, maybe their favorite journal. And so we have to recognize this new business model. Just also, I realize we're talking primarily about journals, but there's also all of these new open or path to open, a variety for monographs. And in some cases, are we going to support those? And how will we do it? Because once again, each one of them is a different model. Sometimes you get embargoed if you can't see it, even though it's going to eventually become open. So we're trying to figure out as a group, how do we support transformative across the consortium for journals and monographs?
Thank you. Alison.
So in terms of strategic priorities, it's really clear to us that we're being asked by our customers, and by our community, and from the people who fund everything that we do, that open access is what they want. So clearly that means we have to find ways to manage that. A lot of the work we're doing is helping our editorial teams and societies understand this and understand the impacts to them, helping them navigate the potential changes in the financial picture for each of their journals. So particularly, again, going back to the the different impacts on different types of society. So the humanities and social sciences, we're really helping to guide them to be more efficient as they possibly can, and so that they can sustain themselves in what's becoming more of a volume publishing market, which is very, very challenging, and we don't want to hurt that community, but finding ways to do things more efficiently for them, more effectively for them. And then I think the other element of what we've got to do is we're pivoting to think author first in much of what we're doing. And so the idea that you have to have a really easy author journey now to compete for content. Everybody wants the very best content in their journals. They want to attract that content because that's what's going to drive financial performance. In a way, before we were curating content in the subscription world, we're now trying to attract more and get greater market share. So how are we supporting each of our societies to look at that opportunity space, but also, putting it bluntly, to stop interfering in some of the processes that perhaps don't matter so much in the next generation of author. Early career researchers want rapid publication, they want minimal touch, and they want a consumer-grade experience through the process. So we've got to pivot everything that we're doing around supporting that community and doing it very best, while adding the value that matters, peer review, really giving them exceptional feedback on the content that they're publishing with us, and helping them to develop the content rather than interfering in the process of the publishing process.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one final question of the panel, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. But in just a minute, could you tell us what's the one thing you'd suggest that libraries and publishers could do now to support the move to open? And Alison, would you like to take that one first?
Sure, because I think this slide is the one that speaks to this from our perspective a little bit. And it's a horribly complex slide, and I'm terrible at graphic design. So with that in mind, what publishers have traditionally been very good at is standards. We have all sorts of persistent identifiers, a lot of metadata. We're publishing in very consistent ways, especially in a digital environment. We're also looking at all the different tools to check for trust and integrity, to make sure that we're publishing content in the right way, finding new ways to do that. So something like credit, understanding exactly what role each author played on a paper, so we know if something goes wrong, who to ask. But also, we need accountability in our system right now. So we're sort of thinking about how do we draw all of this together to get to the end goal, which for us is showing you value in what we do. I mean, what we need to do is ensure that we continue to be supported financially. So we have to show you, not tell you, what the value is. Old world, cost per download, right? However it might look, impact factor, we have different metrics that we use to look to. But now we're looking at a combination of trust markers, integrity markers, new impact measures, altmetric, for example, we're all very familiar with usage citations. But what about diversity, equity, inclusion? How are we actually encouraging the next generation of authors correctly, representing research that's out in the market? How are we helping to influence sustainable development goals, for example? There are very different impact measures we need to look at now. We can get to all those. We can also network into all the subcomponents of the content that we have, all the data, linking that in a networked content environment. But then the goal is to give each of our stakeholders, be they an individual author, a tenure committee, a library making a published purchase, or a funder assessing the value of the impact of the content that they've published, that they've funded, we need to give you basically a dashboard that shows you this is what you've published, and hopefully across publishers, right? This doesn't work for just OUP, I should add. You need to be able to do cross-comparative work to see where content is actually making a difference in this huge drive to volume. That's what's going to be matter, and that's what's going to sustain high-quality peer review. It's actually going to be what hopefully helps us to change some of the problems we've got with volume right now in finding peer reviewers, for example. We need to make sure we use that resource as effectively as possible and as creatively as possible to add the most value. And to us, that's where we will end up in a longer term in generating and showing you why it's worth publishing in certain types of outlets versus others. And I'm not saying we don't need solid science types of outlet. We need confirmative results. We need negative results, but they should come at a certain cost. Whereas when you've really got an intensive program to improve content. I mean, look at NEGEM, for example, I think is a good example. All the work that goes into checking that content, making it valid, actually making a difference in the world, has a totally different value proposition. How do we demonstrate that as publishers to you so that you know who you should be investing in, how to support your community in where they should publish? So I would love to advance that as a conversation in actually getting to some solutions that drive us forward.
Joel, let me have you go next.
Okay, absolutely. I think a couple of things. One is help libraries understand your OA business model. I think really having honest dialogue about what is possible, and I think from there we can better educate our campuses in terms of, what is possible in terms of offerings, in terms of cost, and then being able to kind of set those expectations in terms of why the model's different, why they look the way they look. Because everybody makes assumptions is that all the offerings are the same, and they're not, and that all the publishers are the same, and they're not. They're all very different. Second thing to consider is helping libraries develop and institute comprehensive communication, marketing, education, and training programs. It's, because it's kind of like, okay, OA, and then what? What do we do after that? And I think that first year is critical in terms of just having, these comprehensive components in place so that we can realize the results that we hope to realize. And then I think the third thing is continue collaborative discussions such as this to better understand the needs and challenges, especially as things continue to evolve.
Thanks, George.
One thing I would like to see is for publishers to develop or improve article submission software so that authors, especially in a consortial contract, are clearly presented with their free APC or discount options. And that's crucial because authors don't know. And if you have a transformative deal and the author has to ask for it, you have to present it to them and make it super clear. Also related to that, I think publishers need to really focus on managing and distributing these APCs between libraries. So that if, for example, I mentioned earlier, if we get 500 APCs in a deal and we want to distribute them via, we don't want the publisher to tell us how to distribute them. We want to figure out who should get how many in this pool. So, and on the upside for a publisher, if you use up all those free APCs, make it easy for us just to add some more in as we go along. I realize, because when they run out mid-year, sometimes your plan is not to do that, but you get pressure from various universities or from authors because they missed out on the free pool.
Thank you. So I think we see trends around the need to articulate value of the deals, to think about the author journey. Just picking up on some themes I'm hearing, that the author journey needs to be very transparent and easy to understand, and that we all need to be very well aware of all of the models. What are the key is there another key takeaway I'm missing that I saw here? Okay. Well, with that, what we'd love to do is hear questions from the audience. And, oh, great, excellent.